many other responsibilities she's carrying so in ISKCON. So we are very fortunate to have her today. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay. So this is November 2nd, 2025, online Plainfield, New Jersey. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. Thank you very much. So we're going to be quickly going through chapters 1 through 3 of the Bhagavad Gita. And very, very important parts. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada identified as our ABC scripture. And this chapters, especially chapters 2 and 3, are the ABCs of the ABCs. So good thing to have that right? If you don't know your ABCs, how are you going to read and write? Most essential thing to have. So there's information about knowledge, our sambandha, our abhideya, how we apply that knowledge, and our goal. And the 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita are the soul, who am I? The prakriti, the material world, where am I? Activities or karma, what am I doing here? Time, how long am I here? And God, is there something beyond? And we can say the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita is, as souls living in the material world, we're performing activities within the jurisdiction of time that actually belong in the spiritual world. So we're going to analyze chapter 1 according to the 9 main processes of bhakti. And of course, there's Sakya, or friendship, and Arjuna's main qualification, which of course is mentioned in chapter 4, text 3. But the fact that Arjuna is Krishna's friend and devotee is the main qualification for hearing the Bhagavad Gita. So also we should be, not necessarily that we have to be in Sakya Ras, but we should be Krishna's well-wisher and friend and accept him as our well-wisher and friend. And the Bhagavad Gita is something that's very important to remember. If this is all you remember, and then your life is successful. So Srila Prabhupada talks about in the introduction that people identify in terms of religion. Oh, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian. But the real Dharma is service to others. This is true on every level. This is true in Sanatana Dharma. Our ultimate business is to serve God. It's true in our ashram Dharma, that it's based on service. And it's true in our Varna Dharma, in our livelihood, that it should be based on service. So these are the personalities mentioned in the first chapter. I remember when I first took up Krishna consciousness, I didn't know who any of these people were. You know, I came from a different culture. It took me quite a while to sort out all these family connections. So in texts 1 through 11 are the battle and the omens of victory, and 20 to 26, the beginning of the war. And here we have great odds, of course, against the Pandavas. So Duryodhana has a conversation with Dronacharya that he's in anxiety about the outcome of the war, and he reveals his expertise in political diplomacy. He also reveals his inflated ego. And then there's conch shells blown, right? Great conch shells. And Arjuna asks Krishna to take his chariot, Senayor Ubayor Majay, in the middle of the army, at which time he becomes confused at seeing his relatives. Now, Kirtan is implied throughout this chapter and the whole Bhagavad Gita, because Sanjaya is narrating the story. But here we also have Kirtan in the form of the sound of the conch shells. because the conch shells were engaged in spiritual glorification. And we have remembering here that Arjuna describes Krishna or addresses Krishna by his various names like Achyuta, Govinda, Madhusudana, Rishikesh, that he's always remembering the Lord's names and pastimes. Govinda, because he gives pleasure to the cows and the senses. Vasudev, because he's the son of Vasudev. That's a mistake there with the diacritics. Devaki Nandana, because he accepts Devaki as his mother. Yasoda Nandana, because he gives his childhood pastimes to Yasoda. Parthasarathi, because he's Arjuna's chariot driver. And Rishikesh, because he's directing Arjuna's senses. So Prabhupada talks about the importance of these. Rishikesh, because he's the owner of the senses. And the Lord is directly controlling Arjuna's senses. It's very important. One of the summaries of Bhakti Rishikesha Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate. Sarvapadi Vinir Muktam Tat Partena Nirno Rishikesha Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate, to give up our designations and to use our senses in the service of the senses. Padasevanam is a little interesting because in one sense, Krishna is acting as Arjuna's servant. But of course, Arjuna is also acting as Krishna's servant. They're serving each other's feet, you could say, and offering prayers. So Arjuna in this chapter is using so many names of Krishna with worship and reverence and dasya, that this service of the Lord to the devotee and the devotee to the Lord. So it's interesting that Arjuna uses the word Govinda, meaning one who gives pleasure to the cows, one who gives pleasure to the senses. And Arjuna's thinking, well, Krishna is going to satisfy my senses, but actually we should satisfy Krishna's senses. Most religionists are going to God asking for their senses to be satisfied separately from Krishna. But Krishna consciousness is that when we satisfy Krishna's senses, because we're part of him, then we also become satisfied. So Arjuna has some arguments against fighting in the war. And we should note that these are all very good arguments. There's nothing wrong with any of Arjuna's arguments. They're all excellent arguments, but they're on a lower platform of understanding. So his first argument, and Krishna is going to defeat all of these. He's going to defeat the first three arguments in chapter 2 and the fourth argument in chapter 3. So his first argument is compassion. He just doesn't want to kill. And even though he's a warrior, he's a devotee and he doesn't want to cause any harm to anyone. So it's such a nice quality of devotee. Then enjoyment. I mean, sometimes we're in this kind of a situation where we look around and all the options are bad. Like there's just no good option. So Arjuna is saying there's just no good option. Fighting isn't good, not fighting isn't good, everything's bad. Then he says it's very sinful. He says, killing your family members is sinful. Killing your superiors is sinful. We know that Krishna killed Kamsa because no one else could kill Kamsa, but then Balaram killed the rest of those family members because he wasn't related to them. Krishna was related to Devaki, but Balaram was not, and Krishna didn't want to kill family members unnecessarily. So this concept of that killing superiors and killing family members is more sinful than killing ordinary persons is prevalent in every society. And his last argument is that he doesn't want to destroy the family. It will ruin their traditions. And these are all, again, excellent arguments. We should care about people. We shouldn't do things that are only going to bring about suffering. We shouldn't do things that are sinful. And we shouldn't destroy culture. War has a very devastating effect on culture and society. Then Arjuna calls Krishna Madhava, the husband of the goddess of fortune, and he's thinking here, well, why are you proposing something that will be misfortune? And Prabhupada says here that Krishna never brings misfortune to anyone. We see Atmani Vedanam. So in this chapter, Arjuna's breakdown is a prelude to his surrender. Now, it's nice if we can surrender to Krishna in any circumstance, and if we can surrender to Krishna without suffering. However, sometimes we're very thick-headed, and it's only because we're suffering that we decide we want to surrender. But if we're intelligent, we should be able to surrender without suffering. In this case, Arjuna's suffering leads him to surrender. So, summary of chapter 1. On the sacred battlefield of Kurukshetra, the Pandavas and Kurus prepare for war as the blind king Dhritarashtra anxiously seeks news of his sons. Arjuna, guided by Lord Krishna, wavers in his duty when compassion for his family outweighs his warrior resolve. Though victory is assured with Krishna by his side, his moral conflict opens the path for Krishna's divine teachings on duty, devotion, and the eternal self. Then we have a little rhyme to remember each chapter. The devotee is victorious with Krishna on his side, but Arjuna, being compassionate, couldn't let his family die. So we're going to go on to chapter 2. So his journey starts with surrender. Now, this is not full surrender. It's later in the Bhagavad Gita that Arjuna says his illusion is destroyed and he's fully surrendering. He fully accepts Krishna as God. So it's not full surrender. It's interesting. He's accepting Krishna as his guru. And you could say that's full surrender, but it's not. He still has a lot of doubts and a lot of questions. And although he's accepting Krishna as authority, he still needs a lot of discussion. And Prabhupada says at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says to Arjuna, "Are your doubts destroyed?" that Krishna was willing to repeat the whole Bhagavad Gita if necessary. So Krishna is a very patient teacher. Krishna is a very patient teacher. And he's happy to repeat the lessons until we get it and we actually surrender. So, oh, Krishna, sorry, it's nighttime here. So chapter 2 is an overview. Prabhupada calls it contents of the Gita summarized. So Arjuna has a mood of humility and desperation. He accepts Krishna as his guru. Krishna explains the science of the self, practical application, and the symptoms of one who's realized the self. So that's our Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, that we are the soul, that our method should be perform our material and spiritual duties in devotion without attachment to results, and our goal is self-realization, become an Atmarama. All right, if we're going to look at the different parts of chapter 2, 1 through 10, Arjuna's further doubts and his surrender, where he says, "Govinda, I shall not fight." Then we have Gyan, verses 11 through 30, fight because there's no death for the soul. 31 through 38, fight because it's your kshatriya duty. 39 through 53, Buddha Yoga or Nishkama Karma, fight because it's your devotional service. And 54 to 72, Samadhi, fight because this is your meditation on Krishna. So really nice way of looking at this chapter, isn't it? There's no death for the soul, fight with philosophy, fight because it's your kshatriya duty, fight because it's your devotional service, and fight because it's your meditation on Krishna. So sweet. So Krishna responds to Arjuna's confusion with strong critical words. Prabhupada often talks about how the business of the guru is cutting, the business of the sadhu is cutting. And Arjuna, again, his arguments were excellent. They were learned, but Krishna said, "Nope, you're talking like a fool, even though you're giving these very excellent arguments." And Arjuna restates his previous arguments, then become confused, takes the role of a disciple, and he says, "Govinda, I shall not fight." Calls Krishna Madhusudana because Krishna killed the demon Madhu, and now Arjuna wants Krishna to kill his demon of doubt. So Krishna is going to answer the first question: what's true compassion? So real compassion is what's good for the soul, not necessarily what's good for the body. And sometimes what's good for the body and material situation is not good for the soul, in which case one chooses spiritual compassion. Prabhupada makes this point many times, that they were good friends, in one sense, the same level, Rishikesh and Gudikesh, but one becomes a student of the other. And sometimes we do this. Sometimes we go to our friends and we say, please help me, please give me advice, please guide me. We take that role temporarily, perhaps, with a friend. And Arjuna, again, takes this role temporarily with Krishna. So Krishna talks about basic instructions of the soul, that a wise person doesn't think the body is the soul. Prabhupada one time asked the devotees, what's the first thing you say in preaching? And the devotee said, we say there's a God. And Prabhupada says, no, the first thing you say is that we're not this body. So we shouldn't give up our duty out of bodily attachment, even if things are inconvenient, because the soul is eternal. The soul cannot be killed and the body will not exist. So Arjuna should not shrink from the war. And he gives these points from all different angles. He quotes Shastra. Prabhupada often refers to the fact that Krishna quotes Shastra in the Bhagavad Gita. And he explains that the soul is impervious to any kind of material transformations. Now, one important side point to bring up here is sometimes people argue that our spiritual form and our relationship with Krishna is something that we acquire rather than something that's part of the soul. But these arguments that what is eternal does not change and the soul does not change are basic philosophical arguments in favor of the fact that our relationship with Krishna must be part of the soul, because if it was something added to the soul could change. And then even Krishna gives a very interesting little instruction here about how to teach. Krishna says, even if there's no soul, then there's no loss in death. There's no meaning to death if there's no soul. So why be concerned about that? And Krishna says this idea that there's no soul is just from people who don't understand that different people have different levels of understanding the indestructible soul. So is Krishna justifying killing? No. In the administration of justice, you have to sometimes use violence. That doesn't mean everybody can just be a judge and kill whenever they want. Prabhupada's not encouraging people to be vigilantes or going out for vengeance, but obviously military police officers, in order to enforce the law, have to sometimes use violence. Then Arjuna said, very interesting point, how are we going to be happy? He was looking at the situation and said, even if we win this battle, the cost will be the destruction of family and killing our superiors. How will that be happy? And Krishna is saying, well, you're certainly not going to be happy if people call you a coward. And even if you lose, you'll go to heaven. If you win, you'll enjoy the earth. That happiness comes from doing your duty. And we can talk about this for a long time, how when we do what's our natural duty, when we act according to our nature, we become happy. And happiness comes from pleasing Krishna. So Krishna is pleased when we do our natural duty and we do it for his pleasure. Happiness doesn't come from our externals, a repeated theme in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, Krishna is talking about another repeated theme in the Bhagavad Gita, how to have action without karmic reaction, which here is called Buddha Yoga. So it frees you from indecisiveness. You have fixed intelligence and you have eternal benefits. Okay, now what happens when people don't act with Buddha Yoga? They get enamored by Bhogaishvarya, and they become enamored by the different parts of the Vedas, which incline them to enjoy the world. Now, very important verse here, 245, is where Krishna says, Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna, you should act above the gunas. I can't count how many people have told me that you cannot expect us to act above the modes of nature. And I'll say, well, it's in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So an elementary chapter of an elementary scripture that we should act above the modes. Obviously, it's something that we are expected to do. And act out of duty only without personal attachment. So this means there's no sinful reaction, purifies our previous sins, it grants liberation. But in order to do that, you have to be disinterested in all of the glittering allurements of this world, and then one will be in samadhi. So then Arjuna asks some very important questions. And this section of chapter 2, which is about the symptoms of someone who's become perfect, is very important. It's a frequent question. I'd say it's in the top 10 of questions I get asked. How can you tell who's advanced, or how can you tell if you're advanced? And this is explained in this part of chapter 2, where Arjuna says 4 questions. What are the general symptoms of somebody who's above the modes of nature and acting in Buddha yoga? How does he speak? How does he restrain himself? And how does he engage in activity? So general symptoms: he renounces all desires for sense gratification and enjoys pleasure within. He speaks, neither praises nor condemns the duality of mundane good and evil. So I was just talking to a devotee who was saying that she no longer thinks in terms of good and evil, but she just thinks in terms of, well, there's different points of view, different ways people are acting, and different ways they're fitting into Krishna's plan. I mean, it's interesting. Prahlad Maharaj was renounced this idea of friends and enemies and good and evil, and yet he became the king, where he'd have to distinguish between good and evil and mete out justice, but he wasn't thinking in those terms. How does he sit? Or in other words, how does he restrain himself, having this higher taste, paramdrishta nivartate, from focusing the mind on Krishna? And if not fixed on Krishna, the mind will fix on sense objects and drag one to illusion. And Krishna gives the example of a turtle who can withdraw their senses. Now, these very important verses, 62 and 63, that we have contemplation leading to attachment, leading to lust, leading to anger, bewilderment of memory, loss of intelligence, and falling into the materialistic pool. Yes, we've all had experience that when we think about something a lot, we get attached to it. When we get attached to it, then we want it desperately, regardless of the consequences. That's what lust means. When we don't get it, or we get it and we're disappointed, or we get it, it's wonderful, and we lose it, we become angry. And then we forget philosophy, we forget scriptures, we forget all the good instructions, and then we lose our intelligence and we act like an idiot. And we may permanently, we do things that permanently affect our life. Yes. So, I think I'm missing a slide here. Anyway. Okay. So, and here we have, oh, here it is, text 64. So this text 64 is the key to conquering this problem of verses 62 to 63. So again, this problem is this contemplation, attachment, lust, anger, losing your memory, losing your intelligence, and so forth. And the key is in text 64, where Krishna says, with our mind, we should become free from attachment and aversion. With our body, we should regulate the senses, and then Krishna will give his mercy and his grace. Very important verse, 264. All right, how does such a self-realized person engage in the world? He engages his senses with regulation and religious principles. His senses are satisfied, his mind is peaceful, and he's not searching around for sense objects. So Krishna says, although it looks like a self-realized person is the same as a materialistic person, they're actually as different as day and night. Because the person is not being driven by their own desire and false ego. So the summary of the Stiti Muni: general symptoms: self-satisfied, desireless, undisturbed, unmoved, introspective, sage, speaking impartial to duality, withdraws his senses, establishes intelligence, mind on the Lord, acts with regulation for the satisfaction of the Lord. And at the end of this chapter, one thus situated enters the kingdom of God. Summary of chapter 2. Arjuna, overwhelmed by sorrow and moral confusion, surrenders to Lord Krishna and accepts him as his guru. Krishna begins to instruct him, explaining the eternal nature of the soul, how it is never born, never dies, and cannot be destroyed, and thus teaches that lamentation for the body is ignorance. He delineates two essential duties: swadharma, one's worldly duty involving responsibilities toward family and society, and sanatan dharma, one's eternal duty towards God and all living beings. Krishna introduces the principles of karma yoga, performing one's duty without attachment to the results, acting in spiritual consciousness rather than out of desire or fear. By harmonizing both dharmas through selfless action, one purifies the heart and ultimately becomes an Atmarama, a spiritually realized soul who finds joy and satisfaction within the self. Here we have our little rhyme scheme. Desperate Arjuna accepts Krishna as his master. Krishna chides, "We are soul, ever unchanged by matter. Winning or losing, Kshatriya finds happiness doing his duty. Better yet, in Buddhi Yoga, fight to please me without a worry. Senses and mind engage for me, full in himself, a liberated soul, free from dualities of gain or loss, achieving me the topmost goal." Huh. Okay, since we're still like this. Wait, chapter 3, Karma Yoga, how to fight this war. So here we're looking, our sambandha is that action is better than inaction. Abhideya, practical action, work for Krishna, and our goal is to conquer lust. So in the second chapter, Krishna told Arjuna, become a yogi and become a warrior. But Arjuna couldn't figure this out. Like, how am I supposed to become a yogi and a warrior? How can I cultivate buddhi and samadhi and sense control, yet fight in a bloody war? So he asked Krishna to clear up his confusion. What's better, karma active duties or sankhya cultivation of knowledge? This question is at the root of a lot of the problems among devotees in our Hare Krishna movement. So many devotees think that their work in the world, their work for a family, their work at a job is Maya. And the only way they're going to become Krishna conscious is to, retire, go to a holy place and not do anything within the world externally. That it's not possible to be, I remember even one GBC member a few years ago, someone said, "How can I do my job for Krishna?" And he said, "You can't. All you can do is give your money to Krishna." And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's not the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. But that's Arjuna's confusion. And Arjuna has this confusion for quite a while. So it's a very funny statement Prabhupada makes in this purport to 3.1. He says, Arjuna thought of Krishna consciousness or Buddhi yoga or intelligence and spiritual advancement of knowledge as something like retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerity at a secluded place. In other words, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse. So again, we see this a lot. Not too long ago, a year or so ago, one devotee said, "Oh, I can retire and I can move to India." And I'm like, "How old are you?" "Oh, I'm like 38. And I said, that's for like 98. you should be thinking of what can you do for the mission, not just thinking about your own hearing and chanting. So Krishna says that both are valid. He says that we're doing karma yoga is valid, and retiring from everything to cultivate spiritual life are also valid. But if you do action without philosophy, it's mundane work. And if you have knowledge, but you're not applying it, it's powerless. And Krishna definitely makes the point that karma yoga is superior to Sankhya. Sankhya is really a combination of Gyan and Dhyan, or meditation, philosophy and meditation, which has become very popular in the world today, usually under some Buddhist concept, but some sort of philosophical detachment and meditation. So Sankhya is incomplete. If you just have knowledge, it can't help you. You have to put knowledge into practice. It can't just be theoretical. So otherwise, it's just impractical. And Krishna says everybody has to act. You can't just give up actions. And people are, if they just say, well, I'm giving up all actions, they're just pretenders. He said, better is to do unattached work. That's superior yoga. You can't even stay alive without working. I've thought about this a lot in regard to this statement. Because we have a material body, we have to spend a lot of energy and a lot of time just keeping the body alive, just keeping it clean and clothed and the right temperature and enough food and enough water. It takes a lot of our time and energy. So it's pretty difficult to be completely lazy. And Prabhupada says it's better to be a sincere sweet sweeper than a charlatan meditator who's just trying to make a living from meditation. Today I was walking out at Govardhan Hill, and there are these guys there, setting up altars with Govardhan Shilas and just asking for money. I mean, their purpose is simply money, and they're almost shameless about it, actually. So an important thing to understand is renunciation of activity isn't a means of purification. It's the result of purification. If you're purified, you're like, I don't need to do these things. So it's not a question of stopping actions, but acting purely. So very, very, very important point, that whether you're liberated or your bondage is not your activities. Of course, some activities are intrinsically binding, like meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling. But, other than things like that, and other than being a mafia boss or something, it's not our activities. It's not, are you a banker or do you run a prasadam restaurant? That's not the point. The point is one's consciousness. We are told that you can be a Bhagavatam reciter. What does Prabhupada say? Professional Bhagavatam reciter. You can be reciting the Bhagavatam not because you love Krishna, but just because you want to make money. I mean, you can be, like Prabhupada would say, using the Shalagram Shila to crack nuts, not literally, but in other words, you're just showing the deities to make money. You're just, again, here in Vrindavan, people in the stores, they're like, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. They're saying, give me money, give me money. So even activities that we would say are intrinsically spiritual, you can do in a materialistic consciousness. And you can do ordinary so-called material activities in the spiritual consciousness. The point is much more the consciousness than the activities. Again, there are certain activities that are intrinsically sinful. But putting aside those that are intrinsically sinful, it's a matter of one's consciousness. And then the question might be, well, if karmic activities bind me, how can the same actions free us? Of course, this is explained by Narada to Vyasadeva, where he says that does not a thing when applied therapeutically cure a disease which is caused by that very same thing. So here we have this very important verse, Mukta Sangha Samatra. So if we do everything for the sake of the Lord, then everything becomes a yajna. Everything becomes Yajna, Prabhupada always translates as sacrifice, but it's some sort of ceremony of connection, a means of connection with the Lord. And everything becomes like that. There isn't a difference between, working at a bank or cooking for your family. If you're doing it for Krishna and doing some yajna. So one could say, well, even if I'm doing it for Krishna, I have some personal attachment. I'm cooking for my family deity, but I'm thinking about what I want to eat. So the answer is, even if you have some personal desires, you'll get purified by doing yajna. It may be gradual, but it will purify you. And this is also very, very important verses in the 3:10. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yajna, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation." Sometimes I see devotees think that we're supposed to be miserable in this world. But no, we're supposed to live happily in this world and go back to Godhead, both. Really funny quote. My late friend Prana Prabhu always thought that this was a humorous statement, where Prabhupada says, Sankirtan Yajna and Krishna consciousness go well together. So if you're engaged in Sankirtan Yajna, it's very easy to be conscious of Krishna. It's very easy to think of Krishna if you're chanting Krishna's names congregation. So when we do yajna, it fulfills our desires, but it also purifies the heart. So Prabhupada says that Vishnu and the demigods will fulfill your desires, but if you try to enjoy them without yajna, it's sinful. And of course, he gives the example of food, yajna shishtasino santo, muchante sarvakil bishai, bunchate te tukam papa, ye prachantyat vakadanat. And one would assume he gives this example of food because it's an example that Arjuna would be very familiar with. And he also talks about how sacrifice brings the rains. Yes, so of course, this particular verse is a core pillar of our Hare Krishna movement, the concept of eating prasadam, distributing prasadam. This verse is something Prabhupada quotes a lot, Anyad Bhavanti Bhutani, that everybody needs rain and everybody needs grains. That we're not just interested in samadhi, we're not just interested in enlightenment, we're also interested in having peace and prosperity in the world. We're also interested in having a sane, stable, happy, piously prosperous life for ourselves and others. And then you could say, well, if I'm doing yajna for personal enjoyment, how does it purify the heart? And it's because all yajna comes from the Vedas, which come from the Lord, so it's doing something that's Krishna's will. So they're all ultimately transcendental and purifying. And if I'm just acting selfishly without following the scriptures, then it will lead me to darkness. One of my favorite statements, that the transcendence is everywhere. How are you going to find it? This was, of course, Hiranyakashipu's question to Prahlad. Hiranyakashipu had tried to kill, or he didn't personally try to kill Prahlad, but he tried to have his associates kill Prahlad in so many ways. And when that was unsuccessful, Prahlad, very emboldened, then went and preached to his classmates, something he had not done previously. And that really frustrated Hiranyakashipu, who then decided, well, he figured he couldn't kill Prahlad. He already tried, but he could kill Prahlad's power source. So he's like, where's your God? And Prahlad says, well, he's everywhere. So if God's everywhere, it may be hard to find him, but you can find him in yajna. You can find him in the ceremonies to connect with him. And Prabhupada writes in his purport, after creating or impregnating the conditioned souls into the womb of material nature, he gave his directions in the Vedic wisdom as to how such conditioned souls can return home back to Godhead. So this is the concept of yajna. that by following this, we can become purified. So, summary of these verses, that Krishna has designed the material world to encourage sacrifice, to encourage yajna. He does this by making material advancement dependent on yajna. By worshiping the Lord for material well-being, one becomes purified and advances. So Krishna is very clever in that respect. All right, but suppose you're already purified. Because Arjuna could say, well, I'm already purified. So this is also very important. Chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, I feel, is just such a core philosophical, practical understanding. It's a chapter I've read over and over again, and I really enjoy reading it. It's just so rich. So if you don't have any material desires, you don't need to be purified. You don't need to do any duties, but you're not adverse to them either. You're not like, well, I don't want to do them. And you have no reason to do your work. You have no reason to not do your work. And those who are already purified, they're generally performing their prescribed duties with detachment to set an example. So then Krishna says that, look, I don't have anything to do, but I'm doing things to set an example, or else everything would be ruined. And this is an answer to Arjuna's question about destroying the family tradition and creating unwanted progeny, because Krishna says here that if I didn't do my duty, there would be so many unwanted children, because people would be irresponsible. They'd say, well, I don't have to do my duty. I'll just create children and walk away. So this is one of my favorite verses. I think it's very important to remember that a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. So this is the concept that I'm just dependent on Krishna and just trying to please Krishna. So Krishna said that one who wants to become purified has to do duties. One who's self-realized can neglect his duties, but even self-realized people do their duties to set an example for the general mass of people, that whatever a great man does, common men follow. And Prabhupada talks about how teachers should actually be exemplary in their lives, not just expert in teaching. So again, Krishna says that, he says, I don't have any reason to do anything, but I do things to set an example for the common people. Now, there is another reason, of course, and that is as a service for Krishna, that Krishna would like self-realized, highly qualified people to be running the world. Not just to set an example for others, but because they can run the world selflessly. So this is, again, Krishna mitigating Arjuna's doubt about unwanted children, the last of Arjuna's objections. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all of these worlds would be put to ruination. I'd be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So now Krishna's answered all 4 of Arjuna's objections. So why don't liberated souls set an example of renunciation? Well, of course, sometimes they do. And generally they do at the end of their lives, like Bhaktivinoda in the last 4 years of his life, Raghunath Das Goswami at the end, Rishabdev at the end, the Pandavas at the end, but generally not, because most people aren't qualified to do that. If you're an attached person and you renounce your worldly responsibilities, then you'll try to fulfill your desires by irresponsible means. And this is something we've seen in our Hare Krishna movement. People say, well, I don't want to work at a job, and they try to do something to make a lot of money quickly, so they won't have to work so much, and they end up doing something that is sinful or sometimes criminal or cheating and so on. So how should one preach to those who are attached? So Krishna says, ignorant think that they're the doer, but the wise know that things are done by the nature, so they don't try to enjoy the fruits of their work. Of course, this is a very famous verse, Prakrite Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvasha Ahankara Vimudharma Kartaham Iti Manyate. to think that they're the doer. This is another repeating theme, that I'm not actually doing anything in this world. I'm just the observer. This is a point that, again, those who are interested in jnana and meditation in this world are really emphasizing in modern society. Be detached and see yourself as the observer. So when we're preaching to ordinary people, we don't tell them to give up work, but we set a good example for them, and we tell them how they should work for Krishna. Now here Krishna says to Arjuna, don't disturb the ignorant. And Prabhupada says, the devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. So they take all kinds of risks to preach to the ignorant. It's so nice in Madhurya Kadambini, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the way that conditioned souls get bhakti is that the devotees kindly give it to them, and then Krishna's mercy follows the mercy of the devotees. Okay, let's go a little bit deeply into this verse, 330. This is the translation from the 1972 edition. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy. The Sanskrit word here is jwara, or fever, fight. First sentence in the purport is, this verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. So this indicates how to work for Krishna above the modes of nature. Let's analyze this a little bit. We have 3 positives and 3 negatives. Dedicate our work to Krishna. Don't try to enjoy our opulences independently. Don't try to enjoy them as bhoga. Enjoy whatever we have to enjoy in this world, enjoy it as Krishna's mercy, and always be aware that I'm a spiritual being. The 3 negatives: don't think I own anything, act in my own nature, don't imitate others' nature, and don't be feverish, which Prabhupada translate as lethargy. When we have a fever, we feel very lethargic and tired, or we may get very crazy in a fever, undirected craziness. So again, Krishna is going on, how should we preach to those who are attached? And he says, if you follow this teaching, you'll be liberated. If you don't, you'll be ruined. Interesting purport to verse 31. And this is a very hopeful purport. An ordinary man with firm faith in the eternal injunctions of the Lord, even though unable to execute such orders, becomes liberated from the bondage of the law of karma. In the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. Really, really nice purport whenever we find ourselves struggling, or whenever we're kind of down on ourselves about something. And again, how to preach to those who are attached. You can't force someone to give up their conditioned nature, but you can purify them by dovetailing it. Now here we have a series of verses 30 through 33, which are almost identical to 1857 through 1860. So very important points here about doing our duty. So surrender to Krishna in full knowledge. If you don't follow this, you'll lead to failure. If you follow them, you lead to salvation. And one's going to do one's activity in any case. We can't repress our nature. And so it's a question of doing our nature for Krishna or doing our nature for Maya. So Krishna is defining sin as avoidance of one's duty. And we may ask, well, how is that sin? So as soon as we're not doing our duty, we're under the control of our mind and our senses. We're acting according to our own selfish consideration. And Krishna says, don't follow someone else's path. Now, again, we have this almost identical verse in 1847, Shreya Swadharma Viguna Paradama Swanustitat. This is one of only two verses that are repeated in the Bhagavad Gita. The other one is Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto. And then the last two lines here are somewhat different, but they're saying very much the same kind of thing. So in 1847, it says you're not going to have sin if you do your duty. And in 35, if you do someone else's duty, Prabhupada translates this, to follow another's path is dangerous. Better to be destroyed doing your own duty than to be successful doing someone else's duty. To follow another's path is dangerous. I want you to note the word bhayavaha. In 1847, he's a little differently, but he says that you're not going to have sin if you follow your own duties. So if we have to do a good job in someone else's work, that means we have to pretend to be someone else, which is exhausting. Prabhupada says doing unsuitable work is dangerous. The Sanskrit word is bhayavaha. Our work becomes a vehicle of fear. If we're not doing the work of our own nature, the work of our own nature generates an inner sense of happiness. But if we're not doing work according to our own nature, we don't have any intrinsic satisfaction. So we're going to worry about, fear, complain about, and attempt to adjust the externals. And we're hoping that if we can do the externals, that will substitute for what's intrinsically out of sync by doing someone else's work. Our work becomes a vehicle of fear. So you may know that I work with a co-author, Dr. Ruchira Datta, to write a book called Career Dharma. And we talk a lot about why we should do our own duty, what happens if we do someone else's duty. Now, I find it fascinating that right after Krishna says, do your own duty, don't do someone else's duty, Arjuna says, why do we do things that are sinful against our will? And if we look at the context of this, it would have to mean, why do we not do our own duty? Why do we sometimes try to do someone else's duty or neglect our own duty? And Krishna says, it's our own lust. Lust means I want something so badly, or I want to get rid of something so badly that I don't care about the consequences. That, and it's the all-devouring sinful enemy of the world. And Krishna gives these analogies: fire covered by smoke, mirror dust, embryo covered by the womb. We're covered by different degrees of lust. How are we going to conquer this lust? Well, it hides in our senses, our mind, and our intelligence. Oops. And the senses are the weakest, so they're the easiest place. So follow religious regulations. Then intelligence is stronger than the mind, which is stronger than the senses. And the soul is higher than the intelligence. So by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Okay, summary of this chapter. Krishna addresses Arjuna's confusion over whether knowledge is superior to action, clarifying that forced inaction is impossible. And Krishna explains the concept of karma yoga, instructing that one must perform prescribed duties not for personal results, but as a sacrifice for the satisfaction of God. By working with this detached consciousness, one acts as an example for society, fulfills one's purpose, and avoids the material bondage created by self-centered desires. Krishna concludes the chapter by identifying lust, kama, as the all-devouring eternal enemy that drives a living entity to commit sin, and outlines a method for conquering it, controlling the senses, mind, and intelligence. Let's look at our rhymes. Inaction with the restless mind is impractical pretension. For happy living, act for me and achieve liberation. Set an example and calm your mind by attractive motivation. Control insatiable lust, the killer of self-realization. Work for Vishnu as sacrifice in this world and beyond, then all will be nice. Those self-realized souls have nothing to do. They work so the ignorant can have a good clue. Do work of our nature, or our vehicle is fear. conquer lust with great strength to make everything clear. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, we're pretty much at the end. One person had a question.
Yeah, so that will go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for the very nice class. Mataji, can you show your slide around 230 again? There you said something like, if the soul is not there, then nothing really matters. Which sloka is that?
Oh, okay.
It's around 226 to 230.
Yeah. Second.
Yeah, it's talking about Vasika, Vaisesika, whatever, different class with it. Yeah.
Sorry, which sloka, Prabhu?
I think
Okay,
class 8 or 29, I think. I have to check.
This is somewhere around 26 to 28.
Which is the sloka?
You want me to go get my Bhagavad Gita and look up the exact sloka?
Yes, Mataji, because I have point of contention here. Sorry.
No problem. It's over here on the other side of the room. Okay. Let's see. So
26.
yeah,
It's 26.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, 26. Atachainam nityajatam nityam va manyase mritam tatapi tvam mahabaho nainyan so itam arhasi. If, however, you think that the soul will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament, O mighty art.
Okay.
And the next one, 27, 28. One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death, one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? So those are really the three verses, 26, 27, and 28.
Mataji, can you show your first two slides also, please?
I'm going to show my slides again. Okay. First two slides. It's not easy to do over Zoom. So my very first slide for chapter 1.
No, Mataji, next one, please. Yeah, which sloka is this, Mataji?
No, this is not a sloka. It's the 5 topics of the Bhagavatam, as the Bhagavad Gita is explained in the introduction.
So, okay, I mean, how do I relate this to slokas in Bhagavad Gita? Like, I want to say, hey, this first point, who am I, is related to this sloka.
Every sloka is related to one or more of these.
Okay.
And you can analyze each chapter in terms of this, which this was a fast presentation, so I actually removed a lot of the slides. But I have a slide like this for each chapter. So each chapter can be related to how these 5 topics are discussed in that chapter.
Okay, Mataji, thank you.
This is not a particular verse.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisance. All Krishna Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Mataji. That's very simple, direct, easy to understand. I have a doubt. I hope you could clarify it. Mataji, we understand Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the absolute truth. And when we talk about absolute, there is no gradations. At least in our sense of being relative, conditioned, there's low, medium, high, ultimate, whatever. There are these levels, but not so in absolute. But at the same time, we learn, Mataji, that Bhagavad Gita, the word of God, is the initial. Then after that is Bhagavatam, which is graduate, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is postgraduate. So why these gradations when everything is talking only about the absolute, Mataji? What's the correct way to understand this?
Oh, and then you want to get further confusion. So then Krishna in Dwarka is perfect, and in Mathura more perfect, and in Vrindavan he's most perfect. How do you
Yes,
become more perfect?
correct.
You can't. I think we're having here a language problem. So when we say that Krishna is the absolute truth, we mean it's not true in some circumstances and not others. So like I'm sitting here in a room in a house in Govardhan, India. That's a relative truth because I'm not always sitting. Like a minute ago, I was walking to get a
Mm.
book. So sometimes I'm walking and sometimes I'm in other places. In fact, I'm usually in other places. So to say Urmila is sitting in a house in Govardhan is a relative truth. It's true sometimes. So when we say Krishna is the absolute truth, we mean that he's always truth. So Bhagavad Gita is always true. We're not saying that the Bhagavad Gita contains all possible iterations of truth. I mean, indirectly it does. Indirectly, if you just understand the Bhagavad Gita, that's enough. Frankly, if you could just understand chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, chapter 3, that would be enough, honestly. In one sense, everything's there. But in another sense, there's permutations and gradations and unlimited understandings of what is absolutely true. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean that everything in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Bhagavatam or in the Chaitanya Charitamrita is true for all people at all times and all circumstances. Like Krishna is saying to Arjuna, stand and fight. Well, that's not an instruction that's true for everybody all the time. I'm sitting down and I'm not fighting, and I think probably none of you, I hope none of you are fighting. So there's a few instructions in the Shastra that are true for everybody at all times and in all circumstances. And we discuss this kind of thing in hermeneutics, and many other instructions of the Shastra that are supporting those eternal, universal, transcontextual truths. And then there are other things that are contextualized of eternal truth. But when we say that Krishna is the absolute truth, we mean that Krishna is he's always reality. It's not that he's reality sometimes and he's not reality other times. He's always reality. Ultimate reality is always Krishna. I hope that answers your question. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Mataji, so that I'm not misreading this. So is it that when we are talking about these gradations, as you gave the example, you're sitting, walking, and we can relate to that, all of us do that. Similarly with Krishna, so it is our understanding, me as a conditioned soul, I could get deeper or wider understanding of Krishna, and that's where the Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita and other things come in. But for him, Krishna itself,
I
it
think
is the
that's a
same.
good, I think that's a good analysis. That, yeah, you're getting deeper, wider, more variegated understanding. But the point is that Krishna is not a relative truth. Even if you're going to say, I'm Urmila, that's a relative truth. I wasn't Urmila in my last life. And I probably won't be Urmila in my next, wherever I go after leaving this life. So that's a relative truth. If you say, well, that person's Indian or that person's French, or those are relative truths. They're, this is my son, this is my mother. Those are relative truths. They're true sometimes. But Krishna is always God. He's never not God. So in that way, we can say that he's the absolute truth.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that every verse in the Bhagavad Gita has the same universal applicability. Certain things in the Shastra, again, are true for everybody in all places and all times, and certain things are not, even though they're all pointing to the absolute truth.
Understood. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, we have Govinda Nandini. Yes, what is this question? It's in the chat. Could you connect how you find chapter 3 is a very interfaith concept? Yeah. It's basically about that. The essence of chapter 3 is that you're not going to find spirituality generally, for most people, most of the time, you're not going to find spirituality by walking away from the world. There's a place for that for some people and at some times in life. But generally, we're going to find spirituality by taking whatever nature we have. Prabhupada would call it our psychophysical nature, which can't be repressed and is going to manifest anyway, either for Krishna or for selfishness, and dedicating that for Krishna without attachment, dedicating it to Krishna with love, dedicating it to God with love. And this doesn't matter what religion you're in. Secondly, as we're talking about duties, our given duties, please comment. This is also true variety of services that come our way for our disposition and liking. It's not so much a question of disposition and liking, but how we're drawn to be of service in the world, not just what do I like to do. I mean, we will like what our service is, but it's outward facing. It's how am I drawn to serve? What is my intrinsic nature that is pushing me to serve? No service is higher and lower. That's a fact. That is absolutely a fact. Krishna does not see one service as higher or lower. I mean, we can say on one hand that certain services are more important or that certain talents are more rare. But as far as their intrinsic value spiritually, all services are of equal importance. And they're all of equal, they all bring equal joy to Krishna. Okay.
Anyone else? Other questions, comments? Okay, Amangi Mata.
Devotees that material life and spiritual life cannot go together. Material life is materialistic consciousness. It's not so much an activity. Again, there are grossly sinful activities. So pretty hard to do grossly sinful activities to please Krishna. That's kind of a contradiction in terms. I can't do something to please you that you don't like. It doesn't work. But other than grossly sinful activities, everything else in the world we can do to please Krishna. What doesn't go with spiritual life is a selfish mentality, not a particular way of acting. Krishna wants there to be bankers and software engineers and farmers and government officials, professors. He wants all those things, and he would like all those things to be done by devotees. That'd be nice, right? If all the governments were run by devotees and all the businesses were run by devotees, and that'd be lovely. All the crafts. Okay, is there anything else?
Krishna Guru, can I ask a question? Because I tried to raise a hand but doesn't work.
Go ahead, Jagadish. Okay.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. Mataji, I have one question. You mentioned the duty, right? Krishna said, do the paro dharma. But like to understand that, what is our own
Or
natural
swadharma. Don't do the parodharma.
Yeah. So how to understand like as per the nature, what is your duty and what is your not the duty. Like, for example, we work in IT job.
Oh, I
for
wrote a
material
whole book
existence.
about this.
So how to realize that this is IT job, like I'm working in IT. This is just to material existence, but what actual
So
my the
I-
natural duty?
Okay, so I wrote a whole book. I wrote a book. I wrote a course. I do consultations on this. So I worked with the co-author, Dr. Ruchira Datta. We have wrote an Amazon best-selling book called Career Dharma: The Natural Art of Work. And you can find that online. It's online in print and ebook and audiobook. We have a self-paced online course at careerdharma.net. And we also have on careerdharma.net a list of certified coaches at various places in the world that you can do a consultation with. I also do consultations. So generally people taking the course or reading the book can figure it out themselves, but if people want a consultation, then we can do that as well.
Thank you so much, Mataji.
You're very, very welcome. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much for your time, valuable time.
Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you so much.
Mataji, Jai.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna.
Friends, see you all today evening for Sunday feast. I think Jayadris from Maharaj will be there, I think, as far as I know. And from Bhagavan Kesa Maharaj may be there also. I'm hearing, so don't quote me, I think. So in any case, please come and take the association of devotees and hear Krishna Katha and dance and feast, as Prabhupada has established the movement for. Next upcoming festival is this 5th, November 5th is the last day of Kartik, Damodar month. Increasing Krishna consciousness, giving books to others, asking others to show the lamps, offer the lamps, other devotions or chanting and anything else they can do. Bring them to temple if possible, if not, at least they can practice at their home. Last day of Kartik, November 5th, Wednesday, I think most likely we have a program. We'll let you know. And next upcoming big festival is December 1st, which is Gita Jayanti. That means get ready, take the books, distribute the books, start now. Don't wait for the day. And Gita Jayanti Yajna will be there, I think, Monday evening. We'll confirm. So, unless we are doing Sunday evening for practical purpose, but we will post the details. So, yeah, if you need books, please let us know. One of us, Gita or any other books, so that we can get it. If you don't have, I think we have lots of books, regional language, pretty much so many books are there sitting. So please take the advantage and try to distribute as per November, December. Outside also, most of the people are going through holiday period. Good to give and try to suggest these books. And many times Westerners are more welcoming to take the books than the Indians. So it's important to give it to outside world as well. They may take up immediately or not take up. That's not up to us. That's up to Guru Parampara and Lord. So, okay, thank you very much. See you all today evening. Partner time is already, I think, almost ending soon. So, if you are not broken, break your fast for Ekadasi. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone has a question, comment? Govindas, you can avail govindasng.com, or if you want to order, also you can contact us, Madhupati Prabhu, or one of us. If you want to sponsor for any event today evening or Kartik last day or Gita Jayanti, Sunday feast or anything, please let us know as well. Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. Hare